Hello and welcome back. Today we've got the shared responsibility model in AWS, which is an important topic and one that is likely to feature on the exam. So let's dive straight into it. When you're working with the cloud, AWS is responsible for security of the cloud, whereas you as the customer are responsible for security in the cloud. So let's have a look at what this means in a bit more detail. At a very foundational level, AWS is responsible for regions, availability zones, and edge locations. So for example, a building that they're renting in order to create or facilitate an availability zone, they're responsible for the rent they pay for that building, any electricity and power supply to that building, any physical security of that building. They're responsible for all those things. They're also responsible for any hardware and AWS global infrastructure. So, for example, a server that they install in that building or a cable that runs underwater between continents that they're using to facilitate their services. They're responsible for the security of those things. Next, they're responsible for compute, storage, database, and networking. So let's say they buy a server and install inside that building, or they buy and that server has CPUs on it. They're responsible for the security of those CPUs. Or let's say they buy a hard drive and they install it on that server. They're responsible for the security, physical security of that hard drive. Then let's say they install some software in order to help run these services or help provide these services to us as the customers. For example, later in the course, we'll talk about a hypervisor, which is a type of software that's installed on a server to break one physical server up into several logical little servers, which we'll be using as EC2 instances. So they need to install that hypervisor to provide their services, and they're responsible for the maintenance, the setup, the configuration, the security of that hypervisor. Now, as a customer, we are responsible for client-side data encryption, data integrity authentication, server-side encryption, and networking traffic protection. So a simple example of this would be an SSL certificate. If you want to host a website and you want the website to be HTTPS and not HTTP, which is kind of the standard these days, then you need to install an SSL certificate. And you'll be responsible for configuring that SSL certificate, for paying for it, for making sure that it's up to date and that it's functioning correctly. Next, we are responsible for an operating system or operating systems, network, and firewall configuration. For example, let's say we want to install Linux or Windows on our EC2 instance. We'll be responsible for installing, configuring that operating system, and making sure that it's patched, that it's up to date, and that it's secure. We're also responsible for platforms, applications, and identity and access management. So that it means any software that you install into the servers you're renting, as well as access inside AWS. So you need to make sure that the right people have the right access to the right resources, and that is your responsibility to make sure that that is the case. And finally, any data of your customers that you're hosting or you're keeping in your AWS resources, that is also your responsibility to make sure that it's safe, secure, and follows any compliance and regulations that are applicable. So there you go. That's how the shared responsibility model works in AWS. It's very useful to think about this as you go through the rest of the course and you look at different services, or we look at different services, to kind of investigate or to think about how they work and what you are responsible for as the customer and what AWS is responsible as the provider. Here's a quick summary of what we discussed. I look forward to seeing you back here next time. And until then, enjoy the cloud.